In today's video, we'll look at the subject of hell, a dogma of the Church. And we'll look at the writings of Luisa Piccarreta to give us some insight into questions regarding why do Marian Apparitions often have the vision of hell, and why do the saints often experience hell or visions of it? And what kind of insight can we receive from Jesus' teachings concerning the divine will as it regards to hell? The first apparition we'll look at is the most well-known, Fatima. And here's a quote from Sister Lucia. "We saw, as it were, a vast sea of fire. Plunged in this fire, we saw the demons and the souls of the damned. The latter were like transparent and burning embers, all blackened or burnished bronze, having human forms." And subsequent to this vision, our Blessed Mother says to Lucia, "You have seen hell, where the souls of poor sinners go. To save them, God wishes to establish in the world devotion to my Immaculate Heart. If what I say to you is done, souls will be saved, and there will be peace." So our Blessed Mother is reminding us that there is in fact a real hell, and there is a threat of souls going there. And she's offering us a refuge in her Immaculate Heart. In Kibeho, it's an apparition that is perhaps not very well known, and it's unfortunate. And there was a vision of hell there as well by the seer Alphonsine. And she's quoted as saying, "Hell was a disturbing and dark place of fierce fire and complete separation from God." And what our Blessed Mother was attempting to do there is there was a oncoming genocide that was going to occur in the 1990s, 1994 to be exact. And these visions were in 1881 and 1882, and she was attempting to call the Rwandan people, where this occurred, back to God. And perhaps showing them a vision of hell would be sufficient to do that. But like many apparitions, unfortunately, our Mother's call often goes unheeded. As she said to Alphonsine, our Blessed Virgin Mary said, "I speak to you, but do you not hear me? I want to lift you, but you remain down. You turn a deaf ear. When will you do what I ask of you? You remain indifferent. When will you understand? When will you take interest in what I want to say to you? I give you signs, but you remain incredulous. How long will you turn a dead ear to my appeals?" Next we'll look at what the saints say about hell. And it starts off with a very famous quote from St. Teresa of Avila. "Souls fall into hell like snowflakes. Inward fire and despair are the greatest torments of all." So these are what the real saints have to say about hell. And unfortunately, there's false theologians, I would say, the anti-saints of the apostasy that are often quoted, and they don't want to actually come out and say they don't believe in hell, but they'll say things to dissuade others from believing. Like they'll say that they believe hell is empty, or some nonsense like we should all hope that there is no one in hell, or the hell will remain empty. And they can't come out and say that they don't believe in hell, because hell is a dogma of the Church. The next quote's from Blessed Anne Catherine Emmerich, In hell, perpetual scenes of wretched discord, and every species of sin and corruption, either under the most horrible forms imaginable, or represented by different kinds of dreadful torments. Vice appears in its own grim, disgusting colors, being stripped of the mask under which it is hidden in this world. Very interesting conceptual view of hell. And St. Catherine of Siena, I saw the torments of hell and those of purgatory. No words can describe them. Had poor mortals the faintest idea of them, they would suffer 1,000 deaths rather than undergo the least of their torments during a single day. And that's where you can see our Blessed Mother would show children like Sister Lucia, Jacinta, as a good, very small young children. And it did have a profound impact upon them. And Saint Jacinta was often noted to be on her knees for hours praying. And the rosary was a constant companion of hers. And this is perhaps the most exact information from the saints, is the vision of Saint Faustina Kowalska. The kinds of tortures I saw, the first torture that constitutes hell is the loss of God. The second is perpetual remorse of conscience. The third is that one's condition will never change. Basically, she's referring to despair. The fourth is the fire that will penetrate the soul without destroying it. A terrible suffering. And this is something you'll see that when we talk about the writings of Luisa Piccarreta, that the very fire of the Holy Spirit, the joy of the blessed, is torment to the damned. The fourth is the fire that will penetrate the soul without destroying it. A terrible suffering, since it is a purely spiritual fire lit by God's anger. The fifth torture is continual darkness and a terrible suffocating smell. And despite the darkness, the devils and the souls of the damned see each other and all the evil, both of others and their own. The sixth torture is the constant companionship of Satan. The seventh torture is horrible despair, hatred of God, vile words, curses, and blasphemies. And next, St. Thomas Aquinas. And he answers the question, one of the questions that we're attempting to answer, as to why hell is often emphasized with the saints and in apparitions. That the saints may enjoy their beatitude and the grace of God more richly, a perfect sight of the punishment of the damned is granted them. And indeed, you'll see this said almost word for word in the writings of Luisa Piccarreta by Jesus to her. And next we'll start with Luisa Piccarreta's writings. And the first is regarding her experience in hell. She, in the Book of Heaven, says that she spent an hour in hell, and she does not go into detail regarding descriptions of it, but she discusses how it made her feel. The first is, I felt I was in hell, keeping company with the damned. I felt love changed into hate. Oh God, what pain, unable to love you. And then a thought flashed through my mind about the hour spent in hell. And immediately I said, Lord, forgive me. How many offenses I've given you. And he, do not want to afflict nor disturb yourself. It is I who leads the soul deep into the abyss, to then be able to lead her more quickly to heaven. And indeed, what better wake-up call to be showed the condition of the damned and the torment that awaits them and those who turn away from the will of God. And here's some very interesting quotes out of the Book of Heaven regarding the power of the divine will as it relates to hell. The first one was something when I first became involved with the divine will and started studying it. This was a quote that actually surprised me very much. "Nothing escapes my divine will, not even hell. So the divine will is even present in hell." The next is, "Indeed, it does not leave anyone, not even the damned in hell. Rather, it is there fulfilling its inexorable and irreconcilable justice. In fact, in hell there is no reconciliation. Even more, it forms their torment. It is right that one who did not want to receive it in order to be loved, made happy, and glorified, receive it to be tormented and humiliated. Therefore, my will does not leave anyone, either in heaven or on earth or in hell." And again, "It can be said that wherever my divine will is present, there extends the act of the creature done in my will." So this is the divine will, or acts within the divine will, done by the creature and how it affects hell. "Even in hell, they feel the power of a creature operating in my divine fiat, because just as all of heaven feels the new happiness, the glory, and the new love of the act of the creature done in my volition, so does hell feel the new torment of the divine will that they rejected, and that while it is present with them with justice, is there to torment them. And every time the creature operates in it, they feel the weight of justice more heavily upon them, and they feel themselves burning more." And we'll continue this investigation of the power of the divine will as it relates to hell with a couple very interesting excerpts from the Book of Heaven. "The greatest torture I could give to a soul would be to keep her staying before me." This speaks to what they describe in Garabandal and the writings in the Divine Mercy by Saint Faustina as the warning. And Conchita from Garabandal mentions that if she did not know of the punishment of the chastisement and what it was, she would consider the warning a great chastisement. And as for this reason, I'll repeat this: "The greatest torture I could give to a soul would be to keep her staying before me. So in order not to torture her more, first I let her be purged, and then I admit her to my presence." And in the warning, what does Conchita say? She says it will stand before the presence of God, and our sins will be present to us. And that's the agony, and as to why Conchita says, "I who know what the warning is, fear that day." The Queen of Heaven was, and is, the terror of all hell. And that recalls to me a quote by an exorcist, the exorcist of Rome, Father Amorth, Gabriel Amorth. And he mentioned that the invocation of our Blessed Mother is the most effective invocation against a possessed, against a demon which exists in the possessed. And that brings us to the divine will and the devil. The first excerpt from the Book of Heaven. "Therefore my will is hell for him. And every time he sees the soul being subject to my will and knowing its qualities, value, and sanctity, he feels hell being redoubled. and he's referring to the devil, of course, because he sees the paradise, the happiness and the peace he lost, being created in the soul. And the more my will is known, the more tormented and furious he is. And it reminds me of someone who said that as he went into the divine will, it pleased the Lord to let him hear the cries of anguish of the devil. Therefore, you can be sure that the will of God and the infernal enemy never get along, nor can they be together or close. Its light eclipses him and hurls him into the chasms of hell. And this is important for those of us who look forward to the coming of the kingdom of the divine will. This is the answer to our Father prayer, that the will of God be done on earth as it is in heaven. If my will reigns upon earth, my enemy by himself will shut himself up into the deepest abysses. Very interesting. And we'll take a look at sin itself, the reason why people go to hell, and how it relates to the divine will. And I picked some interesting quotations out of the Book of Heaven to review here. My daughter, do not lose heart. When my humanity was on earth, it contained all the lives of creatures. And these lives came all from me. But how many of them would not return into me, because they would die and bury themselves in hell? And I felt the death of each one, which tormented my humanity. These deaths were the most sorrowful and cruel pain of my whole life, up to my last breath. And when he refers to deaths, he does not refer to dying. He refers to the death of a soul. In other words, a soul not returning to its creator, but going to hell. And in the book of, in the hours of the Passion, in the agony of the garden, Jesus tells Luisa that in the agony of the garden, he experienced the death of each soul. Not just souls at that time, but every soul, past, present, and future. But how many moans in seeing families of sin being formed in the marriage, which symbolize hell, with discord, with lack of love, with hatred, and which populate the earth like many rebellious angels who will serve to populate hell. So this emphasizes the importance of the sacrament of matrimony. And those who enter matrimony for the wrong reasons are actually abusing it and creating a sacrilege and forming families, which Jesus says symbolizes hell. Very striking comment from Jesus. Next, sin does nothing but give them sips of death, sips of unhappiness, sips of ugliness, which taken all vital humors away from her, make of her dry wood to burn with greater intensity in hell. Oh, how many moans of sorrows come from the prisons of purgatory. How many shouts of desperation can be heard from hell, because my will was not encountered upon earth. And an important quotation from Saint Therese of Lisieux is that holiness simply consists in doing the will of God. And if that is true, then the reverse must also be true. Damnation consists in rejecting the will of God. I hope you found that discussion regarding hell was interesting, and please like and subscribe. Help us promote this content. Thank you for watching.